This is the United Podcast Network.
This is Voices in Validation, brought to you by IVT Network. IVT Network is your expert source for life science regulatory knowledge. Voices in Validation brings you the best in validation and compliance topics. We interview industry experts from pharma, biotech, med devices, and laboratories. Here is the host of Voices in Validation, Stacey.
Welcome to another episode of Voices in Validation, brought to you by the IVT Network. Each week, we bring you timely interviews with life science experts and discussions focused on trending topics, frequently asked questions, and industry best practices. This week, we are pleased to welcome back Steve Thompson. He is going to chat with us about augmented reality and artificial intelligence in the industry, a very timely topic. Thanks for being with us, Steve.
Good to be here again.
I know, exactly. You've done this before, so you're an old pro.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting because, digital technology is playing a big role across a lot of different industries. And the pharma industry is still toying with really accepting it fully. But it is playing a critical role in the life science industry today for some companies as they begin to realize the need to entirely digitize their validation lifecycle process to ensure that they remain compliant and competitive. And the current pandemic, we've seen people make a lot of companies have to make an about face here and really accelerate and their need for paperless systems, remote validation, eLogs, as they really attempt to limit access, to facilities and reduce exposure to the virus. So today, I know we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and augmented reality and how they're being used to complete hands-free validation processes. But before we dive into that, Steve, can you give us an overview of these technologies being used and how the current pandemic has created this sense of urgency around this technology for so many life science companies?
So simply put, if you have children or nieces and nephews like I do, they play games. And if you go see my nephew, he has a headset on. He probably won't say much because he is in a virtual world playing a game. Sure. That's virtual reality. It's real. It's popular. It's becoming more and more exponentially more popular. So that's virtual reality. So there's a difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. Both are applicable to life sciences, but virtual reality is when you create a 3D simulation of an environment. So you can create a 3D simulation of a laboratory, for example. So you are immersed in that computer-generated 3D virtual world. Augmented reality is a little different because what augmented reality does, and some people have fancy cars with a pop-up display. You could look out and you can see how fast you're going. If you've seen a fighter pilot, they have the pop-up display. So what augmented reality is there's a transparent image, 50, 75%, and that transparent image floats in front of you. And so you can see the image and you can see through the image. Sure. Why is that important? So virtual reality is really good with training and immersion and like a supervisor wants to go in and see what the lab is. A supervisor could virtually walk through a lab and take a look. That's virtual reality. With augmented reality, what can happen is the technician or metrologist, whoever, could be in the environment and they're seeing reality first, which is important for safety reasons, and then the augmented reality second, all the details of information. So that's the basic difference between virtual and augmented reality. And I think the other aspect of the question was why now in the pandemic?
Right. Yeah. And why is this so important, this technology for these life science companies?
So it's an interesting question. About 2.5 years ago, I was with our CEO, Chief Product Strategist. We were at a conference and we saw the virtual reality basically for training purposes. And we had a discussion. This is going to be big. That's way before COVID, right?
Of course.
We didn't realize how big it was going to be. And so back then we started the process of doing the development. And so now we have this app, and the timing is perfect, right? What happened with the pandemic is we are quarantined. And so we can't be on site. And so not everybody can be on site except essential workers.
Right.
So supervisors, quality approvers need to see what's going on. And you can do that with augmented reality because a subject matter expert, quality, can see what the operator is seeing, just like we see on a video chat right now. The other thing is that you're limiting the number of people who need to go into a particular area. So limiting reduces the potential for exposure and contamination. And then the other thing that's happening, our company, Valgenesis, started paperless validation 15 years ago.
Right.
And we're always trying to convince people to go paperless. And it's hard in our industry. People love paper.
Yeah.
That is no longer an argument. That is out the door because paper's getting contaminated and some companies are trying to sanitize paper. How do you do that?
Well, right. And if they're working remotely, it's a lot easier to access digital documents, rather than have to send someone in to dig through the files or whatever. Yeah, I can see where that would be very important at this point in time, especially.
So that's what happened. And it's really gaining momentum. People are clamoring for this type of a solution. And it takes hardware. It takes the headset. I mean, I have headphones on it right now. I should have gotten the virtual reality headset and showed you.
I know.
I have.
That's great. Maybe we can include a little snippet if you have a demo reel or something in the show notes.
Okay, I'll do that because I have the headset and you could get a feel for what it looks like and how it operates. But yeah, so it's a game changer, I think, for our industry. And it's not just for the pandemic, right? So if you look, people on average, about 50% of the workforce takes 5 days off per year. Well, how do you work with somebody, a key person is gone for 5 days, right? So our world has changed. Yes. And virtual work will be more and more prevalent, more so than ever before. So we need solutions to deal with that, even after the pandemic.
Right. No, and I agree. And so the virtual reality and the augmented reality, they sound like really great tools that are maybe somewhere in the future, right? But they're here today. You're talking about an app that you guys have just developed. How in practice can the life science companies use this new app that you have? And are they seeing it as, are they receiving it as the valuable tool that it is, or is it still somewhat sort of a fun gadget in their mind?
A good question. It's no longer a fun gadget. I think the pandemic changed all of that.
Okay.
So it's a reality. It exists. We're not the only ones there. It's very common in places like automotive, Coca-Cola,
Sure.
They use these types of solutions because it helps makes individuals more efficient. And the other thing that it does is, just like you said, you have all of all the information. I'm not even going to say fingertips because you're not touching anything at a voice command. So you just ask and it will pull up whatever is in your system. So we have an app, yes, but it's connected to our cloud-based validation lifecycle management system. So the headset is just a peripheral with an app to communicate to the cloud. And so any company can do that. Just like you could buy a laptop, you can go get these headsets and you could develop your own software or find providers that have it. But that's what you need. You need the headset, and then you need an app to run on it, and it then connects to whatever system you need to interface with.
Excellent. And so what then, for companies who are interested in this technology, what does it take to implement?
So yeah, it takes a commitment to make the change. It's a new technology, and a saying that I say often, I heard it a long time ago: technology is resisted, slowly accepted, and then indispensable. So when you introduce something like this, it'll probably be resisted, and then slowly people will get used to it. So there's a learning curve associated with it. Myself, I had to get used to that boom in front and
Mhm.
voice commands. And we should talk about artificial intelligence and natural language processing in a minute, but I
Yes.
had to get used to communicating with this device. So there is a training aspect of it. But before that, you have to choose whatever headset you're going to get, and you can have augmented reality headsets or virtual reality headsets. And the difference is, like we said before, is safety a concern? Is the ability to clean the device and have it ruggedized so you can drop it, so it's resistant against water ingress or dust particles. So
Sure.
when you deal with that, you're talking more augmented reality. And for example, that's, if we do the video clip, you'll see that's a ruggedized system. You can drop it for like 13 feet on concrete. You could spray a fire hose at it. It's ruggedized. A virtual reality headset's not going to do that. It's going to break.
Right.
But they have pros and cons. So you need to figure out requirements. What
Right.
do you want it to do? Look out for solutions, who is providing it. And if there's nothing on the market and it's really needed, then you have to figure out how it will be developed. Do you develop software or do you have somebody else? Hopefully you don't have to develop it, because in our world, that means a custom system, GAMP5, the highest degree of rigor for validation. So hopefully you could find a solution that's just configurable.
Right. And I think that's really kind of what a lot of pharmaceutical companies and med device companies are doing these days. They're looking for software solutions that are kind of ready to go, that they can then just pick and choose the pieces that they need for their intended purpose.
Exactly.
Who's using these systems, Steve? Who inside the company? Is it the validation teams? Is it management? Like, how do you envision this rolling out, I guess, for companies?
Yeah, so it is the validation engineers. It could be the operators or technicians, who's ever on the factory or facility floor,
Hmm.
or who's ever executing the validation would have this headset on. So they're in front, they're doing it. And what's really nice about it is, if you've executed validation, taking screenshots is a challenge. And with this, you could basically say, camera, take photo. And you've just captured a photo. You could say, video, record video. And you look around and you're recording everything you're seeing. So you're capturing objective evidence live when you're executing the scripts or the checklist or whatever it is, verification or validation. So that's the person on the floor executing. But managers, supervisors can also get in and do a video chat like we're doing and see what the person's seeing. So let's say if I'm validating something and it's not working, or I need help or guidance, I can't remember how to turn something on, then I could say video call, for example. It will call video, supervisor, call my John Doe, whatever.
Right.
And then I'm on the video talking to that person and they're seeing what I'm seeing. And I can say, hey, I don't know what's going on here. It's red and it should be green. And they're talking to me through the headset as well. And they could say, oh yeah, turn the dial or whatever. And then you're off and running. So you could have a supervisor or a subject matter expert guide you through what needs to be done. You could even share images to where they could say, oh, here's the diagram, I'll send it to you. And so they send you the diagram and it pops up and floats in front of you. It's pretty slick.
It sounds amazing. I mean, not only is it super interactive, but it seems like it really provides a robust documentation of everything that you're doing, which, as we know, is very important.
Yeah. And we should talk about this, because I think it's going to change how we validate, right? So artificial intelligence is important for these devices, for image processing, machine learning. So it starts to learn your voice, and that's natural language processing. So why is artificial intelligence and NLP, natural language processing, important? Because we have accents depending upon where we are in the world.
Right.
And it needs to understand your voice and your accent and translate those into commands, because you're driving it with voice commands. And believe it or not, they do a pretty phenomenal job, in my opinion. It takes a while to get used to it. And when you're doing the commands, you have to be a little slow because it needs to understand if you're saying a command versus speaking a sentence that you're recording. So that's the learning curve where you have to get used to it. But once you get used to it, then you're not typing. If people hated typing finger touch, you don't have to worry anymore. You could use your voice.
I love that. I love that solution. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so is this system then connected to a special computer? How is it running?
It is a computer.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there's some that they are computers. So the one that we have right now, we have others, but the one that I'm talking about now is basically an Android platform designed for this particular device. So you would program it just like you would program an Android phone. It's like a peripheral, like a smartphone. It's just a different configuration of the peripheral.
So it sounds like it's really portable.
It's very portable, and it's connected to the internet. It has Bluetooth. It connects to the internet. So just like to answer your question, no, you don't need a laptop or whatever.
Right.
It's a complete computer on its own, and it connects to the local area network, which will connect to the wide area network to the cloud.
Right.
So, I mean, you could connect it locally to a laptop if you had the application. I don't know why you would have the application to do that. In our world, we want everything controlled, not on individual laptops.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. And that's why I was wondering that because, as you introduce new components and hardware and software to the validation process, right, it's just another step and something that you need to consider.
Right.
As validating and also as you are doing your quality, assurance checks. So it's nice that it's not connected necessarily to someone's personal laptop professional laptop, but you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So a lot of times, I'm just thinking this sounds like such an amazing tool again, and we've said that, but cost is sometimes prohibitive for pharmaceutical companies just because of the nature of all of the steps it takes to get it integrated, not necessarily just the program or the module itself. What's the cost? What's the price point here, Steve, if you don't mind sharing that?
So I'll just talk about the hardware cost. The software solution is dependent upon whatever company you're going to work with, but the hardware cost itself is about what a laptop costs. I mean, there's some that are lower cost, but I think in our industry, you're looking at $1,000 mark or above is kind of the general feel for that. And so I would say that's the hardware cost. Now, the software cost is different depending upon whomever you're dealing with, right? So some companies can just say that's just another device that you can use to interface with our system. Right. Or, maybe we're not in the hardware business, so the customers will go out and get it. We'll help them find, the devices themselves. So we're not in that business, but they have to figure out the hardware cost. The hardware costs about $1,000. Software is different.
Yeah, that sounds very attainable to me. That does not sound like, a break the bank kind of scenario at all.
So what's a trip to we don't really travel right now, but if somebody had to fly on site,
right,
then you're $5,000-$10,000. You get 5 or 10 of these units,
Absolutely. No, for sure. So what, obviously this is still early on for this technology. What are some of the challenges, if you can speak to those?
So I think it's early on for our industry, not early on for other industries. The challenges, again, are getting used to it. So quality will always be apprehensive about new things, right? And that's their job, to proceed slowly to make sure things are compliant.
Of course.
And so that will be a discussion that will need to happen, where quality will need to be assured that these devices actually perform as intended, like you mentioned before. And then it takes a commitment from up above that they're going to make that decision. I think the proof is to demonstrate it. And I think when they see what can happen, then I believe they'll get on board. That's our experience right now, is that when people see or hear about it, they want to know more. They want to move. Some of the companies we're dealing with, the forward thinking, are and maybe I shouldn't have said forward thinking. Some of the companies that see the value want it want more and more of it. They see that they have to have it in order to survive in the future.
Right.
So the other challenges, like I said before, would be the individuals getting used to it. And I don't mean to sound condescending or anything, but sometimes on a manufacturing floor, you may have people that are not comfortable with new technologies. You know, I mean, that could be at any level of the organization. Um,
Absolutely.
so getting people used to the technology is a thing. And again, the resistance. So if I come in with a headset and say, you're not going to be filling out the log on paper anymore, and the person in the facility who's trying to do the manufacturing is already busy and their voice commands aren't working, they're going to say, this doesn't work, it's terrible,
Right.
resisted, slowly accepted, indispensable, same thing. So I think those are the challenges that will be faced.
Yeah, and I mean, that sounds about right. You know, you have to get used to it. It is hard for some people more than others, but it is hard as an industry. You know, pharmaceutical has, as you know, been slow to adopt technologies right along. I think they're going to be consistent in that behavior here.
Right.
I would expect. So let's talk a little bit more about what it looks like for the user, because I'm imagining, having seen the video, I'm imagining having, you know, my regular field of vision and then a screen or some sort of image, so sort of superimposed, and wondering if that disturbs, you know, your line of vision. Do people have a challenge with having that sort of dual screen or dual look?
Yeah. So I recently got contact lenses and I always wore glasses. And when I wore glasses with the display, it took me a little bit to get used to it,
Right.
because the display, it's a tiny little screen, but it actually emulates a 7-inch tablet.
Okay.
So when you're getting the image, it's you're seeing it larger than it really is because it's magnified, but it's a little tiny screen. So I had to get it used to the sweet spot, if you will, using my glasses. Now I should try it. I haven't tried it with contacts on. I just got them. But there's another thing that happens is your dominant eye. So people will either be right eye or left eye dominant. And you can flip the boom over to either side. So you have to figure out, and there's a way to test which eye is dominant, and then you flip it to whatever side it is, and then it will, and then you'll be able to see it. It takes a little bit. When I first started with it, it was a little disturbed. I don't know, cognitive dissonance, if you will. I mean,
Right.
things were out of sync. Now I've got the rhythm down, and it just floats there. And the way I would operate is just like I said: execute, select table 5, actual results. The system recorded a temperature of 5.6 degrees. Record. Take photo, pass,
Gotcha.
submit. That's literally, I would have just executed a row in a validation protocol by doing those voice commands.
And so, speaking of voice commands, now are there pre-programmed commands that people are learning to, expected to use, or does the system really start to learn over time your preference of how to say things? I know you talked about accent, but I'm thinking more even just people's commands, how they would vocalize them are probably different, across any given team.
Right. So language support would be needed, and it's tricky when you translate into different languages. So the company has to figure out the best command that represents or in the different languages. So you would release it to where you would support the different languages, and the language would support the right command. I forget the example that when working with the vendor, that certain languages, they chose a word and it meant something completely different, so they couldn't use it anymore in that other language. So to answer your question, there are set recommended commands that they give you, like execute, capture, And they encourage you to use those commands. Of course, you can create your own commands, and it's basically typing in a word, and the system knows. That's the natural language processing. The system will know how to pronounce that word based upon artificial intelligence, machine learning.
Yeah.
And yes, it does learn and get better and better over time. Now, there's another thing when it comes to voice commands, and that is if I'm in a manufacturing environment, it could be noisy.
Yes,
So,
right.
yeah. So, how do I issue voice commands when it's really loud? Well, they triangulate. They actually, I think, have 4 microphones, and they triangulate around your head, and it will pick up your voice. And believe it or not, it's actually better to isolate your voice in a noisy environment than it is not.
Right.
So it's something that they discovered. It's kind of interesting, but I forget the amount. It's like 90 decibels. They have a video of playing extremely loud music. I forget, Pink Floyd or something like that, all cranked up,
Right.
and they issued the commands and it worked. So
That's great. Yeah, and you definitely do need that, especially once people are not remote working as much and they're really getting back into the lab or into the manufacturing space, and there's a lot more people, a lot more activity. It can be a little chaotic at times. So that's definitely a feature that's necessary. Are there any safety concerns with this? I mean, I can't think of any, but I'm just curious.
yeah, well, if I'm it depends upon your environment. So I could be in an environment where there are moving robots, robotic arms picking samples, loading samples, processing, conveyor belts. I mean, in some of these facilities, certain areas are very dangerous, heat, whatever. And so you don't want to obstruct somebody's vision so that they trip over something.
Sure.
Another interesting thing is when you move your head, that's how you scroll and you look around the screen. Up or down will scroll up, down, left, right, pans. And so you have to be sensitive to where to get to the right information, a person doesn't have to turn 180 or 360 degrees. So the design of the solution is important especially if you're in a really an environment that has a lot of hazards. There are other benefits though. So the device has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And so you can set up beacons to where if a person walks in, the beacon can transmit and say, warning, you're entering in, red flash, whatever, you're entering in a dangerous area, whatever. And so the device can actually help you in safety concerns. Now, as an example, I don't know in a really hazardous environment if you would want to put on at this stage of the game a virtual reality headset where you're not seeing reality.
Right. That could be very dangerous. Absolutely.
Yeah. So with augmented reality, it's reality first, digital second. Reality first, digital second. With virtual reality, it's digital first, reality second. In a hazardous environment, you don't want reality to be second.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, and you talked about being able to use this. It's like really, it's resistant to heat and water exposure and things. So it sounds like it's a versatile unit that can be used pretty much in any environment.
Yeah, to the extreme. They could be used in environments more so than we can go into.
Right.
I forget the heat and the cold that it can go to. So yeah, there you can get them, and they even have other ones that are even, for example, some of them IP66. I forget the standard that they adhere to, but there won't be any spark if you drop it, or on those you can't. On some of them you can change the batteries, but on these you can't change the batteries because the battery can create a spark. So if you worked in an alcohol chiller, for example, any spark could blow up the factory.
Right.
So in that environment, you want the headset that's rated to the standard to where there's no spark. And so yeah, you can actually get them to be adhere to the standards. Did I answer the question? I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
no, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's important to note. And so we've been talking about using this technology, in pharmaceutical validation or medical device, I imagine.
Oh, yes.
Validation teams or validation processes. Where do you see this technology being adopted in other areas of pharma or medical device? Like, talk a little bit about how you see this sort of rolling out, I guess, across, the entire company.
Yeah. So, in addition to validation, you got metrology. You have to do calibration, maintenance of instruments. If I had a headset on, I could walk into a manufacturing floor, a lab, and I can virtually see everything that's up to date or things that need to be worked on. I can go up, I could say, scan a barcode. I could say scan, and it'll scan the barcode, pull up all the information for that device, instrument, what have you, and I can see it right there. I don't have to bring paper or go get it.
Right.
So that is people doing calibration and maintenance. The other thing is anything with an inventory. So in shipping or receiving, if you have a headset on, and Coca-Cola, for example, is a company that wants these, and
Right.
you can think all the stuff they're shipping around.
Right.
So you put this on, you're not typing into a computer. If you got raw materials coming in, you could literally say whatever it is, buffer A, scan barcode, take photo, and put it on a shelf, and maybe scan the barcode of the shelf, right? So I have not typed anything in a keyboard, but I've just logged in and taken objective evidence of the product that I receive with date, time, everything. So shipping, receiving on the facility floor. I think there are many uses. We'll probably find out. Oh, training. So across the organization, virtual reality is ideal for training.
Right.
So you could train scientists to run instruments. You can train engineers to run equipment. Anything you can immerse people in that virtual environment, get them trained and qualified before they actually go into the environment. And once they go into the environment, they have a good feel and are pretty trained, much better than just reading something on paper, because they have immersed themselves, and that environment will seem familiar, but reality is no longer virtual. It's, so
Right.
They'll see the real thing, but they'll know, oh, I need to go here. I need to turn this. I need to switch this.
Right. Right. No, it sounds, I can imagine it would also be a lot easier for some, for one individual to show another individual how to accomplish something. Just, them looking, being able to see it and understand what's happening,
Right.
which is obviously a lot better than watching some training video or
Right.
reading and retaining what 52 manuals when you start a new job.
Yeah, I can't do that.
But we know that that's what happens a lot of times, in many different industries. So this is would seem to me a very valuable tool
Right.
that helps with retention of training.
So I'm not saying this is me, but some people will read something quick and they'll sign off, yeah, I read and understood it. That, of course, is never me. I've never done that. But but it's to your point, I can read something, and did I really pay attention, or was I thinking, I wonder if my dog and cat are okay, or, how's this? And I'm just going through the motion. But just like you said, retention is better because I have to do what I need to do. I have to flip that switch virtually. I have to turn that dial. So I can't just say, oh yeah, I understand it. I have to prove I understand it. So.
Right. No. I think that is that's key here. So, we are in the midst of a pandemic, as we mentioned, and that has accelerated people's need to, not only make use of digital technologies, but really this need to reduce the number of fingerprints on actual, whether it's documents, machines, equipment, etc. So realistically speaking, given that current environment, what do you think the adoption timeline looks like for companies? Is this something that, we're going to see many companies adopting sooner rather than later? Or do you think it's going to really trickle in, over the next several years?
Our experience is the response has been amazing, and people want it and want more of it. It hit our industry first. We saw it in conferences with training companies that do training. They were
Right.
showing virtual reality. And now it's like, wait a minute, even architectural and facility planning and build out. So I can put on a headset and show you, and you could walk through the lab I'm going to build. You can see the facility, and I can walk through it as an example. So I think that in certain areas it's already here. So
Right.
the adoption is already there. But with paperless validation or hands-free paperless validation, the pandemic is really what hit. So, that's kind of the first quarter of this year.
Right.
So we're moving into the third quarter. And if you think that these big companies, well-known companies, are clamoring for this technology, I think we'll see it happen pretty quick, more and more.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to keep my eye on it, and I would love to do a follow-up with you at some point in the future where we can really maybe talk about some case studies of implementation and best practices for these, because I think that would be super interesting as a follow-up for our listeners.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you so much for taking time today to share this technology with us. And before I let you go, I want to just see if you have any last thoughts or advice for our listeners who might be interested in learning more about this technology or the types of solutions it can provide.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, if you do searches and stuff, you could get buried in quagmire, sometimes get more confused. But go out and look. If you want to see what it's like, if you have nieces, nephews, children, ask if you could put the headset on to see what they're playing with their games. Maybe you don't want to see it. But,
maybe not their games, but
yeah. But I would say embrace it. Test it out, try it out, experience it any way you can.
Right.
Try to experience. Go to T-Mobile, go to these stores and see if you could actually put a headset on and see what it's like. Don't be afraid of the technology. Just take a look at it and see how it can apply. And if somebody wants to see it, of course, we would be more than happy. This isn't a sales presentation, obviously. We would be more than happy to show what it's like and how it operates. If you want, I can give you a video clip so you could kind of see. There's actually really good videos of other industries, other applications using this and how they actually use it. So
yeah, I
seeing
think that
is
would be
believing.
amazing. Yeah, we can definitely include links to some of those videos in the show notes. So folks, go ahead and just check it out on their own. And then, of course, if they have additional questions, they can always connect with you.
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure to have you here today to share this technology. I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. It sounds like a game changer for sure.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks,
Stacey.
Steve. It's great to have you. I also want to give a big shout out to our producer, Ben Kitchen, and the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. And of course, as always, a big thank you to you, our valued listeners. If you have topic requests or guest suggestions, we'd love to hear from you on that. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we ask you to subscribe in your podcast player of choice and make sure you share it with your friends, colleagues, and your online networks. We appreciate that. For today's show notes and information on this podcast, please visit www.ivtnetwork.com. We'll be back again next week with another great interview. Until then, stay healthy and safe.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.